At the beginning of the 15th, another party of Novgorod Ashkuniks, free warriors and hunters, led by experienced Atamans Luka and Ignat Malagan, set off into the dense forests and harsh mountain gorges of the Upper Urals. The goal of their expedition was the usual one: to collect tribute from the local Mansi people, furs especially sable, so valuable in Novgorod merchant circles. The journey was long and dangerous. They had to cross turbulent rivers, make their way through impassable taiga, pass hunting grounds inhabited not only by animals, but also by spirits whom the Mansi revered and feared. But the catch was plentiful. Fur bales and packs accounted for more than half of the load, and the detachment was already preparing for the return journey when suddenly something strange happened. At one of the rivers, the men came across a camp. There they found a group of unusual people, short, starky, covered with strange spots and sores, wrapped in unkempt skins. Their faces were sunken, their eyes dull. They were not Mansi or even Kami. Their language hardly resembled any familiar dialects, but with gestures and groans they begged for help. It seemed that some terrible disease, unfamiliar and ominous, had befallen these people. Despite their severity and belligerence, the Ashkenazi did not leave the poor fellows to die. In the forest, they nursed them back to health, gave them decoctions to drink, fed them, warmed them, protected them from the beast and the spirit. Gradually, they began to come to their senses, and as a token of gratitude, led the Novgorodians to a place that only a few knew about. They said that an ancient people and great wealth were hidden underground there. The path to this place was long and difficult. First through the dense thicket, then along old paths and crevices between the cliffs, and finally down into the belly of the mountain, where darkness envelops from the first steps. And now the underground kingdom appeared. Before the amazed Ashkuniks, the radiance of gold veins was striking, right in the eyes, as if the walls here were forged not by nature, but by the hand of a jeweler. Places of gems, rubies, emeralds, topaz, diamonds crunched underfoot, as if someone had scattered ancient royal treasures on the floor. The air was dry but fresh. The caves were arranged like towers, and each had its own light coming from nowhere. But the greatest surprise was one huge cave, littered with scrolls and books. There among the golden riches knowledge reigned. It was in this hall that one of the Ashkenaz, a Bogomilian icon painter, stopped. Neither stones nor metal attracted him. He looked at the manuscripts with reverence. They were in different languages: Slavic, Greek, unknown scripts perhaps lost before the birth of Christ. Time seemed to stand still for him. He read, studied, copied, prayed. How much time had passed he could not say. Perhaps days, perhaps months. But one day, those same dwarves who had led them to this kingdom came for him and said that it was time to return. "Where are my comrades?" he asked. The dwarves answered they had decided to stay. Our people had accepted them. Their tone was firm, their eyes were cold. And Bogomil realized that it was better not to ask unnecessary questions. He emerged to the surface late at night. A gloomy silence reigned around, broken only by the whistling of the wind in the rock cracks. The moon barely broke through the clouds, illuminating the slopes of the Ural Mountains with a pale, almost ghostly light. Ashwanet searched for a long time for the camp where part of the detachment remained, called his comrades, wandered among the rocks and forest windfalls, until finally he found a fire burning out, surrounded by worried companions. His story amazed everyone. Golden halls, scrolls, dwarves. The disappearance of the rest. He spoke incoherently, as if waking up from a long sleep, and looked around all the time, as if afraid that someone was watching him, even now on the surface. When he led the people back to the cave, the entrance was gone. They searched the entire slope, looked into crevices, descended into enemies, but all in vain. It was as if the stone had shifted, and the mountain itself did not want to open up anymore. Having never found the way back, the Ashkeniks returned to Novgorod, taking with them only the legend. Since then, rumors about countless treasures hidden in the depths of the earth and about mysterious people sorcerers, blacksmiths and guardians of ancient knowledge have not died down in the Ural Mountains. They say that they still guard their underground halls, not allowing strangers to penetrate inside. These legends from the bases of tales, later processed by Pavel Bosov, the story of the mistress of the Copper Mountain, where the secret, underground kingdom and its ruler appear in all their mysterious beauty and power, became especially famous. But the entrance to this kingdom was not known then, and is still not known. Not a single generation of treasure hunters, adventurers, shamans, and mystics could find it. At the end of the 19th and the beginning of the 20th century, the hypothesis of Hyperborea, the mythical land of sages and first people, the birthplace of mankind, gained particular popularity among European and Russian esotericists. Its location was placed by various schools of occultism in different parts of the world, but special attention was paid to the northern Ural. It was there, in their opinion, that the ancient center of surviving knowledge and great secrets should be hidden. And although no evidence was ever found, the legends of Hyperborea, as well as stories about underground cities and spirits of the Ural, continue to live among the people, inspiring new seekers. After all, fairy tales, as we know, are not always fiction. Sometimes they hide a true story. And now a more modern but no less mysterious story. It also happened in the Ural, but in our time. It was a group of young tourists keen on speleology, history and mysticism. For several months they studied the map, collected information about the cave they wanted to explore, and planned an expedition. It is not to say that the path was extremely difficult. However, the trips were constantly postponed. Someone was hampered by illness. Another's car broke down. A third was suddenly called to work. It seemed as if fate itself was dissuading them from the height. Finally, on one of the clear August evenings, they reached their destination. At the foot of the mountain in the Ural wilderness, there was that very cave shrouded in strange legends. The locals called it differently, but most often Divya. It was associated with myths about people who lived underground and used the cave as an entrance to their secret underground city. These people were called differently. Some were devas, some were different. They were credited with unusual strength, longevity and ancient knowledge, supposedly passed down from the Hyperboreans. The tourists set up camp not far from the entrance. It was already late, and it was decided not to go inside. That same evening, they made a fire, made tea, shared their expectations, argued about the nature of the underworld. After midnight, everyone went to their tents. In the morning, Svetlana was awakened by voices. At first, she thought that someone from her group was awake and perhaps had gone to the cave to watch the sunrise or to relieve themselves. But when she listened more closely, she realized that the intonations were unfamiliar. Two people were talking. One voice sounded like a young man's. The other was deeper, more mature. They seemed to be arguing or discussing something important, but the words were impossible to make out. Everything seemed to be wrapped in an echo that was coming not from outside, but directly from the thickness of the mountain. She stood up, looked out of the tent, but there was no one visible, either at the cave or around it. The wind was quiet, the fire had almost burned out. Everything around looked absolutely calm. Thinking that perhaps this was a hallucination from fatigue or a play of sounds, Svetlana wrapped her head in her sleeping bag and tried to fall asleep again. But her heart was beating fast, and even in her drowsiness, it seemed to her that she could still hear fragments of phrases spoken in some strange, seemingly archaic language. The next day, she told her companions about it, but no one heard anything. Moreover, in the morning, everyone was there. No one had left the tent at night. And even more so, no one had gone down into the cave. Her story caused only slight bewilderment. Someone joked about the voices of ancient spirits. Someone wrote it off to overwork, but the next night everything repeated itself. I hear someone talking again, she recalled later. I already thought that the guys were returning to the camp. Maybe they went somewhere, but no one came. And the next evening everything happened again. Then I felt somehow uneasy. This had never happened to me either before or after. Svetlana, was not the only one who encountered something similar. Such stories are not uncommon among tourists who have been in the depths of the Ural ridges. Local guides said that hearing voices or seeing strange shadows near caves is not new, especially in the area of places associated with many ancient legends. They say that those who hear or see the unusual do not always return the same. The famous ethnographer Oko, in one of his works, briefly described the ancient Ural beliefs about the so-called exits to another world, which allegedly exist in the depths of caves, especially in ancient backwaters and rock cracks. According to him, divine people or others really exist. They come out of the mountains and walk among people, but people do not see them. They have the greatest culture, and the light in their mountains is no worse than the sun. These people are short, slender, very beautiful. Their voice is pleasant, calm, and their words flow like a song. But only the chosen ones can hear them. They say that they do not just appear out of nowhere. They foretell changes, fateful events. In the village of Vlabelos and in the village of Strogonovka, according to the stories of local old-timers, at night, especially on the eve of important dates, at midnight you can hear a clear ringing, like a bell but without a source. It was heard only by those who, as they said, live with an open heart and a clear conscience. Such people, those who hear the midnight ringing in the mountain, seem to become chosen. Hearing the ringing, they, as if called by something higher, leave their houses and head to the old square near the church where, according to Ledge and the ancient people, the divine people gather. People say that if an unworthy, deceitful or unclean person comes to this place, he will not see or hear anything, neither the ringing nor the light. For him, the mountain will remain silent and the night deaf. But to those who came with an open heart, an old man, one of the maidens, grey-haired with a kind but stern look, often appeared. He did not give a name, did not say where he came from, but with amazing accuracy he predicted destines, revealed signs, and warned of troubles that could happen if people do not change their path. Locals speak of the light in the mountains with special trepidation. It is purer than the sun, it does not warm the skin, but penetrates the soul. This is how those who have seen it at least once describe it. This is an unusual light. It seems alive, it comes not from a lamp or a fire, but from the mountain or cave itself. It breathes, it moves, it calls. In the southern part of the Perm region and in the vicinity of the Ural Ridge, such stories are not uncommon. One of the strangest cases occurred relatively recently, in the early 2003 hunters, at the invitation of a familiar huntsman, went moose hunting in the area southwest of the Krasnoyarski Nature Reserve. They camped on a small, snow-covered island in the middle of a narrow, icy river. The place was not chosen by chance. Opposite there was a lowland where, according to local observations, animals most often came out to drink. As dusk fell, the men wrapped in camouflage robes froze in anticipation. There was no wine, there was a ringing silence. Suddenly, one of the hunters, the one sitting by the fire closer to the shore, noticed a strange, bright point on the top of a distant hill. It appeared suddenly, as if it had slipped out from inside the mountain. A few seconds later, the point began to move, not fall, but rather descend, sliding down the slope, as if along an invisible trajectory. As it approached, this luminous object grew in size. It moved silently, slowly, but steadily. Having descended to the foot of the hill, it flew across the river, illuminating the trees with a ghostly, bluish-white light. When it was a few dozen meters from the hunters, they saw that it was something like a ball, bright as a welding arc, but soft to the eye. The light from it cast clear shadows, like the daytime sun, but did not blind. The ball hung in the air, hovering, only 4 to 5 meters above the heads of the hunters. They sat as if paralyzed. Not one of them dared even move. But suddenly one of them, driven by fear or the instinct of self-preservation, threw down the gun and fired. the balls suddenly flared brighter than lightning, illuminating everything around with such light that the trees and snow sparkled with strange, unnatural colors. At that moment, the hunters were seized by an animal, a primal horror, as if something inside, at the level of instinct, screamed about mortal danger. Without saying a word, the people rushed away from the island, not making out the road, breaking through the bushes, falling into swampy areas, and scratching their faces on a frozen branch. They ran as long as they had strength, towards the huntsman's hut, stumbling, falling, not turning around, just to get away from this unknown light. When the hunters came to their senses, a little in the hut, over a sip of hot tea and under a warm blanket, the huntsman, having listened to their story, only nodded. He admitted that these fireballs are not at all uncommon for those places. According to him, they often appear in the area of the same mountain, as if that is where their source is located. The balls are different. Some calmly hover above the ground, disappearing after a few minutes. Others follow people at a distance, and sometimes even suddenly approach, scaring them to death. Previously, the huntsman assured they did not harm anyone, but it seems that something has changed recently. Interestingly, the employees of the Krasnoyarski Reserve also told of similar incidents. Once in the midst of the summer season, they were forced to urgently leave the camp in the mountains when a fireball began to pursue them along a forest path. Witnesses described it as making a sound similar to a jet engine horn, although there were no military installations or even remote villages in those parts, not to mention factories or airfields. People hid among the trees holding their breath, and when the ball finally disappeared, they quickly descended from the mountain, abandoning further exploration. It is curious that some eyewitnesses describe the light from these balls as no worse than the sun. A similar formulation was used by the ethnographer of Glasses in his notes about the Virgin people, claiming that in their mountains, the light was no worse than the sun, and only the righteous heard the ringing. Is it about those very balls? He said, is it not a coincidence? Or is it still a continuation of an old Euro legend, originating long before our time? If 150 to 200 years ago, such phenomena were associated with the mystical, underground people, wild people, then even now, centuries later, they point to some kind of anomalous activity, firmly connected with the Ural Ridge, the north of the Perm region and the Sverdlovsk region. Perhaps the underground people have not disappeared, as some believe, but continue to exist next to us. We have simply begun to hear them worse and see them less often, but they are still nearby in the mountains, underground in the depths, where no ordinary person has ever set foot.